Serge Salager is the founder and CEO of Visualping, a website change monitoring platform used by millions to track competitors, compliance updates, price changes, and job postings. With that, Serge, we're thrilled to have you at the live event and very much looking forward to your presentation.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having here. Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to discuss about pricing. This is something obviously very important for any one of us running a company, how you price your product, how you price your SaaS product, how you price your AI product. Obviously, this is most of my examples are technology-based examples as we're running a technology company. And even if this actually might not make sense for you, some of the pricing tips might be something of interest for those who are not in technology. I'll start saying pricing as a lot of you guys know, it's complicated. This is an example, as you can see from the Zoom pricing page. Zoom is a fairly straightforward product. It's just a way for you to communicate with via video call. It should be simple, but when you go there, you'll see there are about like 4 to 5 different pricing pages. First, you have a pricing where you have to choose whether you're an individual or you're a business. Then you have to choose whether this is for workplace, this is via phone, this is for events. You also have different rooms. You have to choose the number of seats. You have to choose also whether you can make phone calls from US or Canada or international. Then you have to add like about 50 different add-ons. Some of them are free, some of them are paying. Anyways, pricing it's very complicated, but it's a way you actually capture value you're delivering to your users. You make money, you pay salaries, you make investors happy. Pricing is actually what makes your startup work or die, or your business or your project work or die. So I'm going to go through some different pricing concepts or techniques. This is, again, especially relevant for people who are starting a new company or launching a new product, especially if it's a tech product. So my apologies in advance if this is not related to you, but the first thing to take care to bear in mind when setting up pricing, classically, pricing has been always cost plus. So when you have a widget or you have a physical product, typically, you get 30% margins on that physical product, 40% maybe in the luxury side if you do a lot of marketing, etc. But in software, especially when you launch a new product, cost plus doesn't really work. Typically, in our case, for example, our gross margin is 80%. So you'll have to think about a cost plus. You add 80% to your COGS. Which is a bit difficult because in software, as you know, most of the investment is on the development of the software and not necessarily where you host it, etc. So the software development costs are key. But anyways, the Y Combinator about 5 to 10 years ago, they came with a very simple rule. It's called the 10-5-20 rule. And I'll show you in a second how this works. The first thing is on the 10 side, you have to, when you actually delivering value to your customers and you actually thinking about how much value should I capture that I'm giving away. And that number is 10. So the value perception for the customer needs to be 10 times more than what you're charging. 10 times is a lot. So if the customer thinks you're giving a $1,000 value per month if it's a subscription, you then can pay yourself $100. So it's a tenth of the value you are receiving, and it's a larger margin. So this makes it very obvious for customers to say, "Oh, wow, I'm getting 10 times more value that I'm paying for this product." So it makes a lot of sense, and this is how you start. Second trick is a 5. They recommend when you launch, raise prices by 5% every year, until you get 20% of your customers say, "Oh, this is too expensive. I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to see competition. I'm going to do something else. I'll do it myself." So that essentially allows you to, especially for those who like to undercut themselves, like it was our case when we launched our product, you think about, continue to raise prices until 10% of 20% sort of the users say this is too expensive. You know that, and this is where you actually stay and stop increasing prices. So but the 10 value, the 10x price to value. This is perhaps the most important one. Then the second question is, would your product survive? Will you make enough money in terms of making sure your startup or your product is going to be viable in the long term? And this is where the cost implication comes in. In software, once again, there's a lot of fixed costs, which is the development of the software, but then there's all the elements or commercialization of your software and the commercialization and also support. This is where you actually, when you're a software product owner, this is something you have to consider, is how complicated your product is. So this is the axis. You have low cost or high cost of your product. So this is the low cost is a $10 Dropbox subscription or your Netflix subscription. On the high side, you have way more complicated things, usually enterprise software. I'm not sure Zoom is there. Zoom is probably on the low side. And then on the x-axis, you have either your product is complicated on the right or on the left where it's simple. Zoom, Dropbox, Netflix, all very simple. You don't need much support for the companies. But again, other systems where you need a lot of support or where it's complex with a lot of hand-holding, long sales cycles, etc. This is where it's on the complex side. And essentially, again, Y Combinator sees this as you have to choose in which quadrant you are. The cost you see here, 2K, 10K, 25K, this is essentially how much, this is the annual contract value for your products. So again, Netflix, Dropbox, etc. They are on the low left quadrant. Very simple products to use, self-serve. You probably never have to talk to anyone to use the product. Usually it's under $2,000 per year. You're going to survive there if you are able to have a simple product and charge low amounts for this product. And then you have simple product, but it's high pricing. When you're charging a customer more than $10,000 a year, that customer will require a little handholding. Will have to go through some processes. You have to fill in some security questionnaires, etc. You have probably to go through procurement processes. You have to sign some paperwork, contracts, etc. So you still have a simple product, but you're charging a lot. So you can actually survive on around $10,000 of ACV. And again, I'm saying this is the average subscription for your product, which means that some companies would actually you'll be charging companies up to, let's say, $20,000, and the average is around $10,000 a year. All right, moving on clockwise, you then enter into enterprise, high value, very complex systems. The pricing you have to think about is around $25,000 a year on average. So this is essentially, again, way more complex products. You cannot charge $100,000. This is way too much. You cannot charge $10,000. You will not survive. So $25,000 is kind of where you should be. Obviously, the dead zone, it's on the last quadrant. You see the dead guy here. This is where you have very complex products and you're essentially undercutting yourself and trying to sell these for $2,000 a year. So this is a no-go zone. You really have to make efforts in making your product simple and self-serve if your plan is to charge a low amount. So definitely don't go there if you can. All right. Step number 3, once you decide how much you're going to price your product, $10,000 a year on average, $2,000, $25,000 a year. Then the next question is, should I display my pricing publicly or not? And I had a lot of debates in my team sometimes. Is like, I have obviously those sales reps who don't want to make the pricing obvious. They say, just talk to sales, and sales will actually take care of pricing you out and explain you the value of the product, etc. And on the other side, I prefer not to have too many sales reps, and I want to have a large amount of my revenues come self-serve. In this case, the preference would be, make sure that people can see the pricing, that it's transparent, just like flights. You want to make sure that here's the price of the flights, here are the taxes, and all the add-ons, and you know what's the final transparent pricing. And that's actually public. There's no need for you to talk to a sales rep. So here the answer is yes or no. And you'll see in those cells in green, this essentially, it's just a decision based on pricing. If you have a low price, usually you want it to be self-serve. Here is a sign-up button. There's a pricing page. You know in advance how much you're going to pay per month. The recommendation from Growth Unhinged by Kylie Popper is essentially anything under $10,000 a year, definitely go for self-serve, public pricing. You want to talk to sales if you want to have a demo, but definitely try to make everybody go through that self-serve process. And this makes sense. It makes sense because, again, if you are in the $2,000 quadrant, you want to make sure that people go there and swipe their credit card, and nobody is involved into either demoing the service or giving any support. Then when you move in from transactional and transactional here, it depends. There you go, between $10,000 and $25,000. At the early part, you want to have both. You have we in our case at Visualping, we have a self-serve pricing. And then as of a certain amount in business, we just say, talk to sales for the more complicated options we offer. So you can survive in that segment by having and displaying both. And then definitely if you are pricing yourself above $50,000 a year into the $100,000, $500,000 territory, you definitely need it not to show pricing. It does really make sense to have a $500,000 pricing for displayed on your website as for that amount of money. You definitely need management presentations, 6-month sales cycles, a lot of discussions, contracts, etc. So in these cases, the price is so flexible. It depends so much on the tailoring of your product to your customer, probably, that definitely makes sense to talk to sales and not show any pricing. All right. So that's step number 3. Step number 4. Then it's the biggest question is how do you charge your product? And typically in software, there are two big, and that's prior to AI, there are two big concepts. Either you pay by usage or you pay by subscription, which is essentially just like your electricity bill or your gas. You're just going to go there. You fill your tank, and it's 50 gallons of gas, and you pay for how much you actually are consuming. I mean, people are consuming your product. In software, that can be anything. Like, can be credits, it can be minutes, it can be anything tangible. Usually, this is the simplest way to start selling your product. So you don't bother about going for subscription. You ask your customers to pay in advance, so you're essentially buying a certain amount of credits, which then gets consumed. And there's no month end. There's no cycle. There's no billing cycle. Whenever you're run out of credits or run out of gas, you essentially go there and just replenish. Users love it because it's predictable. They know how much they're paying. They know the unit of value. Some customers prefer it too because it's they actually go as much as they can. Now, sometimes they hate it because they have to pay every month or every 2 weeks, etc. So it's a bit of a nuisance because it's not automatic. And this leads to subscription. A subscription is also, you essentially have 3 ways to think about subscriptions. You have to, again, use a unit of value. This can be usage, so you can use exactly the same credits, minutes, tokens, etc. from the usage side. And you say you have essentially different tiers. This is exactly like your cell phone plan. You have different tiers of cell phones. You can you can buy a 50 gigabytes, 100 gigabytes. Also for, this is your TV subscription too. You have a package. You can have 10 channels, 20 channels, 100 channels, etc. So essentially, they pigeonhole, you pigeonhole your customers into different tiers. These tiers, again, are based on either usage, features. You have premium features, less premium features. Essentially, you're going to give the ability to users to unlock some of these features that distinguish between, for example, a personal plan and a business plan and then an enterprise plan. The third solution is seat-based. So essentially, you have one pricing, $10 a month. per user. And then you essentially have different plans depending on whether there's 50 users for your company, or 100 users, or just 2 users. Subscription, you can actually do all of them. Probably if you go back to the Zoom example at the beginning of this conversation, you'll see that Zoom does absolutely everything they can to extract value. So they'll have usage, features, and seat-based different pricings and different tiers. Users love it because it's predictable. You know that you're going to pay $10 a month or $100 a month. You're fine with the cost. You know the value. It's all automated. And this is great. And by the way, you are actually loving it. You should love subscriptions. So anytime you can, just move to subscriptions. The number one reason for that is, financially speaking, people are paying for stuff they don't need. I can bet you every single one of you don't use all your cell phone plans. So you're paying essentially for 50 gigabytes of data. You probably are consuming, like in my case, maybe 5 gigabytes of data, maybe 10 gigabytes of data. And what happens with the 40 reminder? It goes into the pocket of our telco companies. And that's the case also for you if you run a subscription business company, or product. That unit of value that people are purchasing that is not used, it goes into your pocket. So that's why everybody loves to subscription. That's why every single company, from Nespresso to Walmart to Uber Eats, they love subscription. They love, even Costco, they love you to actually go and pay a monthly fee because of this, because I haven't been in Costco for 6 months and still paying that yearly subscription to their stores. Anyway, so go to subscriptions anytime you can, because you're essentially making more money. All right, step number 5. There are a lot of things we can talk about pricing, by the way, but trying to cram this in 15 minutes. The next one is, should I have freemium or free trial? Freemium essentially is like, hey, everybody can actually use your software for free. Dropbox for free. Probably there are a lot of things that you can actually go out there and use it for free. YouTube, you can use it for free. Nobody pays for those. Only 2% of the users actually end up paying for a freemium model. And then you have a free trial. Free trial is essentially, you can try our product for 14 days, 2 options, either with credit card or without credit card. I strongly encourage not to ask for a credit card. You're shooting yourself in the foot, because you are essentially lowering the barriers to adoption here. So anyways, after 14 days, you will essentially end up the trial, and you'll have to buy the product or leave it if you either you pay or leave, essentially, which is not the case for freemium. There are pros and cons for each, and I'll take you through those. So the best way to think about those is essentially thinking about who your customers are. So typically freemium, it's personal users. If you have a product which is a consumer facing and not enterprise facing, just go for freemium. Make sure, obviously, it's free serve. If you have a freemium model, just bear in mind that 2% of the users, or 5% if you're lucky, will end up paying. If you have ads like Spotify, people hate ads. These ads are very intrusive. They managed to actually get the conversion to paying from 2% to 15%, which is incredible. But other than Spotify, nobody else manages to get above 2%. So make sure it's free serve. Make sure, these are small numbers. Make sure your market is in the millions of users. Otherwise, you will not succeed. But that's a way to think about freemium. Free trial, essentially, if you're a business user, if your product is for business use, if it's transactional, where you need a sales reps to be there, then definitely go free trial. You're expecting essentially much lower signups, so the number of users you're going to actually be going through your software will be lower. In our case, it's 10 times lower. But then the conversion to paying is 15%. So the numbers work out in your favor in these cases. You end up with more people converting. And the reason why I love personally free trial, it just fights procrastination. People procrastinate. We are humans. We always want to leave things for later. Under the freemium model, you essentially give a freebie to your procrastination instincts. You'll never want to swipe at a credit card. You will never want to upsell. It has to be really a really big incentive to you to go to the next level, like in the case of Spotify, ads, stopping these annoying ads, or having really compelling paying features, or running out of credits very, very, very fast. Like in my case for ChatGPT, I ran out of credits very, very fast, and then ended up paying for a subscription really again, without fighting too much. But free trial is definitely a way for you to fight procrastination. Very important is the transactional aspect. You have to have salespeople. They know that they have to close that deal in 2 weeks. So it fights procrastinations on the consumer side, but also on your sales side too. They know that after 2 weeks, the trial is over. They lose that customer if they are the one responsible for that transaction. All right, moving on. The last one for today is, what about AI? Most software that we are introducing nowadays have an AI component. So the first question is you ask yourself, especially for those legacy products, like in our case where we're not AI before, now we're completely AI native. But if you're actually introducing your AI feature, the question for you is, do we charge for those AI features or not? There are two ways, obviously, again, two deciding factors, yes or no. And the answer is it depends. On the no side, so don't charge for AI. This has to be when AI is just an incremental feature. This is not core to your system. Just don't charge for it. If it gives incremental productivity, so about 10% more productivity, 20% more productivity, don't charge for AI. And lastly, don't charge for AI if this product is intended for personal use. On the yes side, charge for AI, obviously, if this is core to your products. If you're an AI native company, obviously, there's no way for you to charge for AI because it's part of your product. So definitely do it. Definitely go for charging AI if you can, in a very simple way, demonstrate that you're replacing a human. So this is doing work that a secretary would do or somebody else would do. Definitely charge for AI. Again, I'm using Claude for my AI. Claude actually reads my NDAs and my contracts. I don't have to pay my lawyer to review my contracts. Yeah, Claude does it very well. It replaces a person, a very expensive person. Absolutely, I am paying for Claude. If you're, as opposed to personal use, if your target is business and it's easy to calculate the ROI, definitely charge for AI. And there's also ways for you to charge for AI, which is outcome based. You're not charging for seats. You're not charging a subscription. You're not charging for units of value. You're charging for outcome based. So, for example, there are some chatbot companies which actually charge you for every time the AI assistant has actually handled a transaction or a customer support ticket without a human intervention. They would charge you $5 for that per successful AI intervention without humans being there in the loop. So that's a new way to charge. And again, is that successful or not? I think the jury is out. Definitely, if you're working on an AI company, think about outcome-based pricing. Well, Michael, that's the end of it. Hopefully this is helpful for those, especially those working in software. Any questions,
Fantastic.
please let us know.
So coming up in just a few minutes, we'll have the next Q&A panel, and we will be able to answer any questions that you have related to this presentation. So type them into the Q&A box that you see in front of you, and we'll get to as many of those as we can on the next Q&A panel.